There's no shortage of shiny objects out there in the business world. And if you're not careful, you're going to find yourself saying, man, did I really spend that much money on that thing? It's kind of a rite of passage in business, I feel like, that many of us will find ourselves really excited and jazzed about a certain business strategy. And then months go by and we look back and say, what happened? How come that thing didn't pay off the way that I thought it was? If you've ever found yourself feeling that way or saying those things, good news, you're in good company. I myself have said those things before. But today we're going to be talking about the pain of people who get so excited about these shiny objects, as well as really thinking about your own business. Are you chasing a shiny object right now? Hey, my name's Blake Benz. I'm the host of the Good Advice Podcast, and this is the place to learn how to do business better. We don't talk a lot of fluff on the show, just the actionable, real advice you need to grow your business. Before we dive into today's episode, we do have a business that sponsored today's show. We're going to have a quick ad, and then we'll be right back to the content of our episode soon. Don't forget, you can also support the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. We'll talk soon. See ya.
Do you ever feel like your payment processor is robbing you blind? For some of us, it's not blind. We look at the amount of money that's going to our payment processor month after month, and a lot of times we ask ourselves, is there a better way? I'm making good money, yet so much of it isn't actually ending up in my pocket. In the world of payment processing, in many cases, it's a cashless world, so you have to have a payment processor you can really trust. I personally am a big fan of Brad Norwood, who's the owner of PrimePaymentsUSA.com. Brad's a business owner himself. He knows all the challenges that come with running a business. More importantly, he knows the value of an individual customer. See, some of these bigger businesses, they're all about scale. They're all about bringing in as many customers as possible. But do they know your name? Do they know your business? Do they know what's important to you? In many cases, the answer is no. And in worst cases, they're just looking to get as much money from every transaction that you work hard for, which really doesn't feel too good. So you got to reach out to Brad Norwood today and understand how he's doing business and why it can save you money month after month. More importantly, you might even ask him about his zero-fee payment processing that he's offering to a select few of people. Go to PrimePaymentsUSA.com and start putting the money that you worked hard for back into your pocket.
All right, shiny objects in business. I think this is such a funny topic because many of us have, objectively, we would probably say that shiny objects are bad, that there are no silver bullets in business. And in fact, if you listen to a handful of my previous episodes, you know this is not the first time that I've talked about this concept. It's not the first time we've talked about silver bullets on the show. You know, one of the pain points with silver bullets or with shiny objects is that a lot of times we don't realize we're chasing these things until quite a bit of time has gone past. And then we look back and say, oh, geez, yeah, that was me. I definitely fell into that trap. But today I want to talk about, I really want to kind of lean into this topic because I've seen some content on social media that's got me energized around this. And really what I want to do today is I want to save you money. I don't want to sell you anything. I want to save you money. And I want to give you a really honest take on the state of business. If you are a newer entrepreneur, a newer business owner, if you're growing your business, you're still in the trenches. And when I think of in the trenches, you are trying to replace your salary, I would say. You know, you're probably in that under 100K revenue world. So I want to talk to that person today. I want to talk to the business owner who's a little bit beyond that, who's looking at their first $1 million in revenue. And ultimately, what I'd like to do is I'd like to try to, without dream crushing, I'd like to give as honest a take on today's business landscape as I can. So I've been in business for 6 years, worked with a number of businesses, probably at this point. It's been hundreds at this point. And time and again, I find myself in a very interesting situation where I am having to be the realist in the relationship and to give an honest take on what someone is really excited about. And as I was thinking about this episode today, I was thinking like which example do I want to point to? And when it comes to running a business, I think that a lot of people just simply don't know how hard it is. I think a lot of people don't know how difficult the journey is. You are, for those who maybe you're listening to the podcast, you're a entrepreneur, you dream of the day of running a business. This isn't to talk you out of that, but it is to be really honest in that for many of us, the grass is always greener. We've lived that, we've experienced that, only to find that it turns out you have to water your grass anywhere you live, and it doesn't just grow well on its own. The same thing's true for business, in that many of us have stepped out into a leap of faith trying to grow a business and have found ourselves at some point, maybe this was at the end of your first day, the end of your first week, the end of your first month, we have found ourselves looking in the mirror and saying, okay, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. This wasn't quite as easy as people made it seem on social media. I think that in a lot of ways, people, and this is irrelevant of business. People love sharing their highlight reel on social media. And I'm always very careful to do that myself. I'm very careful to talk about my wins because I never want to be braggadocious. I never want to be ego driven. But I also don't want anyone to ever feel like I don't want to mislead anyone into a path of pain because they thought it was going to be easy. And this is actually a new term for me, the path of pain. I talked about how I didn't want to be overly negative or dream crush today. And here I am, like, just quipping out this random expression. But there have been moments in my business where I have been so deeply broke, where I do not know how to pay my bills. I don't know how to pay a grocery bill. And there have been times in my business where there has been an incredible abundance where I'm thinking, geez, I remember there was a time in my business where we were renting a new house. And I remember offering to our landlord, I said, hey, if you want, I can just pay the whole year up front, just in cash. And I remember it was a moment in my life, which, by the way, again, to bring it back down, there's no way I could do that again. But there was a moment in my life where I kind of thought, man, I don't know if I've ever had this much money before. Actually, I know I have never had this much, like looking at my bank account and being like, this is kind of a crazy feeling. So I've lived both sides of it. I've experienced both sides of it. And between all of that, I have spent my money in places that I deeply regret doing so. And now, 6 years later, I think I have a much more full and mature understanding of how, not just how business works, but the inputs of cash and the outputs of results that you get. So today I want to give just a really honest and realistic look at what the path of business ownership can look like for you. And I want to encourage you. Because the pain of progress, it can be so painful. It can be existential, where you're up late at night wondering, what are you doing with your life? Why did I leave that job? Why did I do this? Whatever story you've told yourself, I want to give you a little bit of hope by being as realistic as possible. Okay? So, the reason we're talking today is, and I do an episode like this every now and then, only because I find myself in sales conversations often having to reframe expectations, and not just reframe expectations in terms of working with someone like a consulting customer, but helping them reframe their expectations for the future of their business. So One of the reasons I bring this up, and I brought up this movie before on a podcast episode called the movie He's Just Not That Into You, where if you haven't seen the movie, it's a chick flick. Um, Girl meets a guy at a bar. I'm butchering it, by the way. Girl meets a guy at the bar. She gives him her phone number and they leave. They separate. The next day, he doesn't call. She's upset about it. She talks to her friends and she's like, and the friends are doing like the very classic, like, oh, maybe he lost your number. Oh, maybe he, and it starts to get kind of ridiculous of like, well, maybe he dropped his phone and a car ran over it. So he's been trying to get a hold of you. And we've all, we've all been in these situations, right? And the sort of the expression that gets thrown up is it's the exception, not the rule. And this is also, by the way, very similar to another concept. And you guys listening, you're gonna have to help me here because I actually don't remember the name of this concept. But the premise of this concept, and in fact, I'll just Google it while we're doing this here. The premise of this concept is that the simplest explanation is often the explanation. Here it is. Here it is. Oh, Occam's razor. Yeah. So Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the explanation. So you give your phone number to somebody, they don't call you. What's the simplest explanation? Is it that their phone, as soon as they left the bar, somebody mugged them and stole their phone and they escaped with an inch of their life? Is it that, they had the napkin with your number on the bar and another patron spilled a drink and they tried to save it, but they couldn't get it? Come on, y'all. The simplest explanation is that he's just not that into you. It's just the name of the movie. It's just not that into you. It just is what it is, right? So more often than not, I find myself in these conversations with business owners, again, not just from a sales perspective, but just talking about their business, where I go again and again back to Occam's razor of let's really talk about this. Now, before I get even more into details on this, well, no, I'll come back to that in a second. So here's a good example of this. Let's talk about Podcastable with the podcast business, the podcast agency. Someone reaches out and they say, hey, I want to start a podcast. Okay, great. What's the goal of the podcast? What are you trying to do? Well, when someone answers with, oh, I want to go viral, and they don't always say it that way, by the way. I think like younger versions of us, and by the way, whenever you can always go on the podcast, whenever I say younger, I don't actually mean by age. I mean by experience in the business world. So younger versions of us, more naive versions of us would probably say that overtly. Other people who are a little bit better traveled, they say that, but they say it in a much more eloquent or veiled way. So here's an example of this. Someone will call or they'll send an email. In fact, this is an email I got, or maybe there's a job, a contact form or something. I can't remember. And the person said, oh, and I don't want to butcher this. So let me actually get the name of this podcast up. Oh man, I don't think I can find it. I'm going to ruin this because I can't think of the name of this podcast as I'm. Oh, here it is. Got it. Okay. So I get this contact form, or wherever this came through. I can't remember. And the person said, hey, I love the Call Her Daddy podcast, which, by the way, is like one of, if not the most popular women's podcast out there. It's one of the most popular podcast period out there. So it's always funny when I get a message like this. Or I got an inquiry a few months ago where someone said, hey, I want to do a podcast trailer for my show. And I want it to be like Diary of a CEO podcast, which is also one of the most popular podcasts out there. So I usually ask one of two questions. I usually say, I'll usually ask, what's your budget? What are you looking to do? And this is most people in general. I don't think this was the case with these people, but most people in general, just because you'll get inquiries from all over the place, Someone will say, "Hey, I want that awesome thing and I got $50 for it," which wasn't the number thrown out here. It was something, maybe it was like $500 or something. So typically, what I'll do is I will reframe expectations. I will help people understand that, hey, that trailer for Diary of a CEO, that's probably a $10,000 plus trailer, easily, easily. For the SEO side of things, someone will say, I had a conversation with a guy who ran a painting company, excuse me. And he said, "Hey, yeah, I'm trying to compete with," and then he basically pointed to the number one search result on Google, which was also the ad slot at the top of Google. And he said, I wanna beat them," and which I don't even do. We don't even do paid advertising. So that was another whole other conversation of like, well, we know we're not the right fit. And this is actually my point though, of like, even when I'm not selling someone, I'm constantly trying to help someone reframe their expectations. And so I said, okay, well, that top painting company, they're spending thousands of dollars on ads per month alone. Do you have the budget to spend that? Well, no. And more often than not, whenever someone's looking at someone else at the top and they're looking to supplant them and replace them, usually their budget is about a tenth or a 20th of what that other company is doing. But it's funny, these situations, because rather than face the facts and face the reality of what it will take to compete, instead, what we do is we look for the silver bullet, we look for the shiny object, we have the wrong expectations. So the goal really probably shouldn't be to beat out that number one company, but it probably is in the short term to make sure you're on page one. You're probably not going to have, you may not have the budget for an incredible podcast trailer, but you should probably make sure your podcast is growing, that you're maybe investing that money into some growth channels for the show, that you're publishing regularly. Hey, you want this podcast trailer to make your show go viral, but you're posting once every 6 weeks. Nobody's following your show. The podcast trailer isn't going to do that. What's going to do it for you is investing in a more stable, rigid process for performing in your business, for publishing more regularly. But what we typically do, here's how this process goes for many of us. What happens is you're on Facebook, you're on LinkedIn, you're on Instagram, whatever you are, TikTok, what have you. I'm trying not to leave out any of my, any of the social media. You're on Snapchat, Yeah, I've actually never downloaded. I was gonna try to sound like I knew what I was talking about. I was gonna be like, yeah, you're snapping with somebody. I have no idea. I've never used this thing before. You're on Blue Sky. You're on Twitter. I'm just fiendishly trying to name off as many platforms as I can. But you're on there and you see a post, you see an ad, which these things are inundated with ads these days. In fact, we're just a random aside. We're so inundated with ads that I don't know if we can remember what it was like when we weren't getting ads endlessly. If you look at these platforms, by the way, it's like every 3 or 4 posts is an ad. Like, it's kind of crazy how many ads are in these platforms these days. But I mean, it's buku's amounts of dollars. I mean, billions of dollars that are it's crazy money. So I get it. Anyway, you're on these platforms, you see an ad, and here's what it says. It says, and I'm trying to think which example to give here. Let's go with the SEO example. What this ad says is, rank number one on Google for as little as $9.95 a month, $9.95 a month. And that's what the copy of this ad says. And then you click on it because you're desperate. You really want, you talk to your buddy Blake, who he's an idiot. What does he know? And you click on this ad. It goes to this landing page. You're in the funnel, and it talks about how it works. And it says, we use AI to, sync with Google's algorithm, and our algorithm led, it's got all the buzzwords that are in it. For as little as $9.95, we'll generate content for your website that will rank you number one on Google. And so what you do is you're excited. At last, I found it. How did I find this hidden gem? Neglecting the fact that, you're one of tens of thousands who've probably seen this ad. So you click on it, and by the way, this stuff's rarely $9.95 a month. It's rarely you're going to spend $10. What's typically going to happen is it's going to either lock you in a subscription model, which that's how a lot of these companies operate. Is if they can get you locked in on a subscription, they know your lifetime value to the business and how long you're likely to stay subscribed before you unsubscribe, which some of you, I hope you feel seen in this moment. Some of you, you have subscriptions for things that you have not checked on in maybe years. Like, look through your bank statement. You might be surprised to take a look and be like, oh my gosh, I still pay for that. There was a moment we got a Apple TV, Apple Plus, Apple TV. What's it called? I think it's Apple TV, right? I don't have it anymore, so I can't. I'm butchering it, but we got it for Ted Lasso, and I got it for Ted Lasso for like season 1, and when season 2 came out a year later, I told my wife, I was like, oh yeah, we got to get let's get Apple TV again so that we can see season 2. Well, it turns out I didn't need to get Apple TV again because I still had it from the first year and I didn't realize it. So I had actually had it for an entire year. So I didn't need to re-up for year 2, for season 2, because I'd had it the whole time. That's many of us, right? So this is a very common model, the subscription model. So either they'll do that, or what they'll do is they'll upsell you. They'll say, hey, you can get this for $9.95, but what we can do is we can give you Google auditing for an additional, $19.95 a month, or it's some whatever buzzword they put on there. And before you know it, you're spending $40, $50 a month on a service. Or worse, it is linked to some kind of big influencer, some guru, some savvy marketer who's actually trying to get you to buy in at $500, $600, $700, which is low ticket, by the way. It's a very cheap offer. Or it's a high ticket. We're talking $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10,000, or even higher. I've seen some of these people sell $20,000 and $30,000 packages. So what happens is you get, you buy in on these things because it's like at last. And the irony of this, you end up spending more money on these things than you would have spent on the less sexy option, simply because you emotionally got locked in and excited about finally, this is the answer. Finally, whoever this described in the marketing world is everybody knows the hill they have to climb to get to the next point in their business. Well, what a good marketer does is they convince the person buying that they actually don't need to climb that mountain. They can go around it. You can go under it. You can go through it. And great marketers use their product or service to show that their product is the vehicle that will let you go around that mountain. The problem with this is when people lie and they talk about how they can get you around that mountain, despite the fact that everyone has to climb the mountain. And I really do mean everyone. This is what goes back to that chick flick. He's just not that into you. It's the exception, not the rule. You may know someone who struck gold and didn't have to climb the mountain and it just worked out and it just clicked. Guess what? That's the exception, not the rule. And this is less really about like hustle culture and like you have to grind and you have to like pay your price to get to success. I don't wish that for anyone. I hope everyone listening that you have enormous success for your business. But the simple truth is business is hard. It is. And I won't put any nuance or caveat on that. Running a business is hard. Learning to sell is hard. Learning to lead is hard. These things are not easy or natural, except for a very select few of us. And since we most often than not have the hero of the story bias, where I'm the hero of the story, of course it's going to work for me. Sorry guys, you're not the hero of the story. I'm not the hero of the story. And despite the fact that I would love to be the hero of the story, where in the story you hear about the person who They start the business, they strike out into sales, and it just starts to click and things start to work. And with enough hard work and perseverance, they make it and they make it big. That's not reality for most of us. And just because I'm recording a podcast doesn't mean it's the reality for me. I have to make my bed. I have to put on both shoes. I have to work hard every day to try to not just provide for my family, but to get good advice and its associated businesses where I want to get them. So don't be misled by, the clever ad or the savvy marketer who convinces you that the path is easy, that the path is simple. It's really not. So, saying all this, here's how you can know you're chasing a shiny object. If it's something that everyone's talking about and you are emotionally overinvested, thinking at last, this is the answer. Now, I'm going to give you two scenarios here. I'll give you two scenarios of two different kinds of customers. Well, one's a actual customer, the other one's not a customer. So going back to podcasting, two kinds of calls I might get. Person A calls and says, hey, I want to start a podcast. I want to do a B2B podcast. Let's do it. Sounds great. What are your goals? Well, I'm looking at, trying to get to this X number of listenership. I want to use the podcast to get people into our funnel on our website. We want to get them over to this certain page. We want to drive traffic to this certain product, service, whatever the conversation, wherever it goes. But I know this is a long game. And so I want to commit a year to this. Okay, let's do it. Let's make it happen. Person two, hey, I want to start a podcast. I've heard podcasting is the best way. I didn't even really know much about podcasts, but someone I work with said that it was amazing for them and that I needed to do it. And I'm willing to do 5 episodes to see if this thing blows up and if it goes viral. Only one of those two people are going to become one of my customers. And it's not about money either. For the second person, even if they want to pay my rate, I am telling them you should not spend money here because you fundamentally do not understand what you're getting involved in. You don't understand this. And by the way, I'm going to, if you don't know me, I'm going to probably say it a little kinder than that. I don't want to make someone feel stupid about it, but I'm out of empathy communicating, hey, this is a shiny object you're excited about that is only going to end with you having wasted your money. I have similar conversations around AI, people who are really jazzed about the latest AI tool, who are really excited about all the things AI is going to do for their business. A lot of times I'm saying, hey, you know what? AI is incredible. AI is amazing. There's some really cool stuff AI is going to do, but you know what? AI is not going to run your business. You have to run your business. You're still going to have to figure this out. And that's for, the person who I think about a guy who was talking to me about, he was like, yeah, I mean, sales, I'm really excited about sales becoming a lot easier because I'm going to put the script I have into ChatGPT. It's going to spit out to me a better script and I'm just going to read that. Unfortunately, the higher the dollar amount that you want to sell someone on, the better you have to be at having a great conversation. And unfortunately, you're going to get some great one-liners from ChatGPT, but it's not going to teach you how to talk to someone. You're going to have to learn how to do that. It can help. It will help, but you're going to have to learn how to do that. I think about people who advertise on the podcast. One of my best long-term podcast advertisers on the show, one of the first things he said to me when we were talking about advertising and buying ad slots on the podcast, he said, I didn't say this, he said, hey, I know this is about my brand. I know I'm promoting my brand. I know this is a long game play. That's a great customer. That's someone who understands fundamentally what this looks like, as opposed to, I had a woman I was sitting down with, and she said, hey, I want to buy some ad slots on your podcast. And I said, okay, what are you hoping to accomplish? And she said, well, I just started my business, and I think if I bought an ad slot, that would give me just it would basically make me money. I would get some great new customers. And I said, you know what? I'll be honest with you. Podcast people who listen to podcast ads, the person who hears your ad as a new business, I can tell you they're not going to pull over on the side of the road and furiously type in your business name. It's a branding strategy, like most ads are. And by the fourth, fifth, sixth time they hear from you, they're going to associate you with that service. But at the end of the day, they may need your service, they may not. But when they are ready to need your service, they're going to call you because they've heard the ad. So that is a more accurate representation for how it works. This whole I want to buy one ad, that's not going to work. It's not going to be any kind of ROI for you. And here's the story I'll share with you. I can't remember if I shared this in the podcast already or not. Part of me feels like I already shared this story, but I can't remember. There was a guy, big music guy, and he decided, you know what? I'm going to create an epic music video. I'm going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on this music video, and this thing is going to be insane. The catch with this is I'm going to do it on a brand new social media account, totally disconnected and unrelated to my main account. And what I'm going to do, we're going to produce this insane music video. It's going to be so good. We'll put it on the brand new social media account to show how possible it is to go viral on a new account. So I watched this video and they made a great music video, incredibly high production, expensive equipment, well shot. It was a great video. Did it go viral? It didn't go anywhere. And in his breakdown after the fact, he was kind of like, yeah, I'm surprised. Like we did everything right. I think about that video every time I see an ad that is like, just say this to go viral. Just do this. I think about podcasts that just have, whether it's Opus or whatever, just have them edit your videos for it. It's going to go viral. Come on, y'all. If you're going to make it in business, you need to have honest expectations for what this looks like and honest expectations for pathways to growth. If you are spending X amount of dollars every couple of months on the latest thing, you are going to forever be disappointed and frustrated that you didn't get the results that you wanted. It'd be a lot better to save your money and then actually invest it in a long-term, realistic answer for your business. And all this to say, again, running a business is hard. It's not easy. You're in good company. Stick to the tried and true principles. What are the tried and true principles? The tried and true principles are, if you're going to grow a business, you need a clear product that solves a problem for a clear, specific customer. And you need an effort around sales, lead gen, what have you, that gets you talking to that specific customer. Everything else, I mean, there's really no other element to it beyond the nuance of, once you scale, hiring, management, all that pizzazz. So be careful with these shiny objects. Be careful with talking to a salesperson who promises you the world and says, yeah, I mean, and here's the deal. I get these things all the time, every day. So I assume the average person is getting these every day. But be wary of the person who says, hey, I'd love to tell you about this service that I'm selling. We just took so-and-so from 100K revenue per year to 4 million revenue per year. Hey, we just took this customer from $4,000 a month to $28,000 a month. I'd love to tell you how. 99% of the time, these people directly are lying to you, or they are not telling you the whole story, or it's the exception, not the rule. Most of the time in my sales, I'm trying to give people, I feel like I'm talking people out of working with me because I'm trying to be as direct and honest as possible. I even had a guy who reached out to me for consulting. A lot of our consulting work ends up being around sales, usually sales and scale. And he said, "Man, I'm really needing some more customers." And I said, "Okay, yeah, we can work through that." We can figure that out. And I said, well, what are you hoping to see happen? And he said, well, I'm hoping that like after we meet, I'm going to go, close a bunch of deals. I'm going to get a bunch of customers. I'm butchering the story, by the way, for simplicity. And I said, you might. I mean, you're definitely going to have the tools to do it. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have to sell. You're still going to have to figure this out. I'm going to lead you the right way, but you're going to have to still put in the work. No easy button for business. Sometimes I think that's the best thing we can do for people, is be as direct and honest and upfront as to the pain that is involved in running a business. But once you get through that pain, you know the story, you know how it goes. We do 80% of the work to enjoy 20% of, I just butchered it. What is it? 80% of our time doing things we don't love, so we get the 20% of the things we do love. It's just the nature of it. So, hey, thanks for tuning into today's podcast episode. I appreciate you listening. If you're a first-time listener, click that subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are in your business. Don't forget, you can also support the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. Thank you all for those of you who support the podcast and for the business owners who partner with us and sponsor themselves on the podcast. We so appreciate it. That's today's good advice. See you later.